the challenge was there were pieces and parts of that that I wanted people to understand the nature of working with these birds, and also understanding the unique relationship where there's an excitement, there's a passion that occurs that when a bird flies to somebody's glove.
Hey everyone, thanks again so much, as always, for joining us for another week of the Falconry Told podcast, brought to you in part by the fine folks at Marshall Radio Telemetry, the makers of the most carefully engineered and reliable tracking systems available. I know it's been a while since we've done these consistently, and it's been pretty sporadic, so let's just jump right in. Here we go. All right, 3, 2, and 1. I think I remember how to do these. I think I do. But it's been such a long time. I think April was the last one of these I did, and I apologize to all of our wonderful listeners for, having such a long gap in between, life, I guess, with this podcast. But it's been an interesting couple months, and I really appreciate you all bearing with us during these times. It's been really hard trying to coordinate anything whatsoever with people to record any of these at all, let alone just live normal life in the wonderful COVID era that we're living in right now. But anyway, I'm John Munier, and I appreciate you all joining us again for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast. And I'm located in Cleveland right now. I'm currently working on an assignment around the Cleveland area, and I managed to link up with some Ohio Falconers kind of close to here, one being Joe Dorrian, who was nice enough to make the wonderful 2-hour trek from Columbus all the way up to join me today, and in my wonderfully small shoebox Airbnb, just to set the setting for you all, since you can't see us, obviously. We're in a small corner, like scolded children, basically, of my Airbnb, with audio equipment set up, and we're raring to go. So
wait, we're doing a podcast? I thought I was just up here to get free Cavs tickets.
Oh well. Huh. Being as I hate pro basketball, you are sorely misinformed in SOL, my friend.
Man.
So how's it going, man?
Good. It's going well.
Good.
Going well.
Good. How's how's life been treating you in this time?
It's been difficult because it's one of those things where life's upside down with kids, and being kind of a independent business person. It's difficult because the business that we run is very, very tied to people kind of coming out and wanting to kind of experience flying birds. So
sure. Well, and in any kind of public situation, if people are scared to go out and do things, or don't want to go out and do things and intermingle with people right now, I guess it's understandable, but at the same time, it's a bummer for any business right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things where you kind of look at it, and, I left the corporate world back in 2016, and, it's times like this where you kind of look at that and go, hey, it might be nice to kind of have that security. Mm-hmm. But even the corporations are, laying people off right and left. So
yeah, well, the fact that you're sitting here talking to me right now is proof that nobody's jobs are safe.
No.
If respiratory therapists and nurses can be laid off during a, quote unquote respiratory pandemic, then any of those things is possible.
Yeah.
So my situation was weird because I wasn't necessarily laid off, but I also wasn't kind of guaranteed my job either. Mm-hmm. It's been such a weird time. So we're definitely not going to, everybody's COVIDed out by this point in time. Me especially. Honestly, if I never hear the word COVID again, it would be too soon. So we're definitely not going to burden everybody with any more details of, that kind of stuff. But how have you managed to improvise and continue to grow what you're doing,
sure,
and just cope right now?
Should I start by introducing a little bit the idea of what we do?
Yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead and just give a little background. So people that aren't familiar with you, just kind of explain a little bit what you've been doing and how you got into everything.
So, my big boy day job for 25 years was working in large corporations in leadership development, kind of executive coaching, basically adult ed. And in 2013, we started put together the idea of creating a falconry school that was very different than the schools that you'd find at a lot of the resorts. Focusing on teaching the public, about the sport of falconry, about the ethical practice of falconry, not necessarily trying to teach people how to become falconers,
right?
But really kind of introducing people to, the idea of relationship between falconer and the birds that they work with in a different way. So, getting people hands-on with a bird of prey is something that is, in my mind, akin to helping them understand what we do in a deeper way and trying to create a broader audience of support for what we do.
Sure.
And so, we started the school, opened in 2014. We've had good growth over the past number of years. And, for us, just like every other, rehab organization, or we don't do rehab, but, the closest thing people oftentimes think of when they hear, a falconry school is raptor rehabbers. And we have close relationships with 7 different raptor rehab organizations here in Ohio. We try to support them with, monetary and food donations. And so pretty much every raptor-based organization over the past, 6 months has almost lost every single one of their bookings, because a lot of what we do is similar to them, and we do libraries and, nursing homes, which I was probably going to, cancel those myself. Libraries, nursing homes, summer camps, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so, when all those disappeared, we still had bookings on the weekends where people come into our public classes. But, that's another revenue stream that was important, especially since we give back a lot to the raptor rehab organizations that we work with, as well as we have 3 different locations in the state. And we give back a major portion, I would say, of what we make to support those organizations. So we operate out of 2 different summer camps and out of an Isaac Walton League location up here near Cleveland. And so, we give a healthy percentage back to them to help, the work that they're doing, whether it's in conservation or, working with kids that they bring in from more impoverished areas. We also do a lot of work where we go in and we give them a percentage of what we make while we're on their site. Plus, we always do 3 to 5 free days of programming for them. So, but a lot of the other summer camps that we do where we come in and work with kids, that helps to sustain a lot of the donations that we make to raptor rehab organizations here in Ohio. And so, when you lose all that, you've got a major portion of your revenue, kind of going out the door. So we sat down and, I always say I worked in HR. I'm business minded, but I was never a business person until I started my own company. And so one of those things that we looked at was how do we, turn on a dime and try to kind of not reinvent the wheel, but basically identify a way that we can still try to deliver. So we came up with the idea of something that we called Hawk House Calls, where we actually, instead of going out to the summer camp, we go out to people's front yards. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because I came up with two names, Raptor Roadshow and Hawk House Calls. And I have 3 or 4 different people that work with me or for me. And so I asked all of them, which do you like best? And I love the idea of Raptor Roadshow. We're going to actually use that as one of our drop downs. But everybody said they liked Hawk House Calls better, which I thought was kind of funny. So outvoted. But, so the idea is go out to people's front yards and bring birds out to them and keep it affordable. And so we've also worked with some of our raptor rehab partners to kind of encourage them to do the same thing because, once again, they lost some of their major funding. One actual organization we worked with, their major fundraising dinner, which is about 60% of all their funding, got canceled because of the situation where we're at right now. So
yeah,
it's kind of tough.
I'm sure. Well, everything from restaurants to bars to businesses like yours, have had, just a huge amount of suffering as far as losses and everything. This goes without saying, but everyone has had to improvise to some degree. So that's interesting. It's it's always interesting for me during these times, especially hearing how businesses of all varieties have been making it, and obviously not all of them are going to make it. So it's a bummer, but I'm glad that you've been able to maintain and continue on. And what got you into just the whole idea of doing anything with birds,
Sure.
period?
I think I can trace it back to pretty much a book that a lot of falconers today, I think their spouses sometimes wish the teachers had never read My Side of the Mountain to them. And so it was in fifth grade, they read that book to us. And for, 2 years after that, I used to walk around with a little leather glove and a whistle just in case I could, see somebody's escaped falconry bird. I was going to call it down. And I already had the area in the garage cleared out. It was the area that was supposed to be for the pony that never showed up at Christmas. So it was all ready for a bird of prey. So, like most of us, you have that juvenile, fascination with the sport, and then life gets in the way. And, I graduated, was it 2003, 2004 with my master's in education from Ohio State. And, somebody gave me a gift card, and I was sitting there at work at lunch one day, going, okay, what is it I used to be interested in? And, bought North American Falconry and Hunting Hawks, and, came in, and we went on vacation pretty much the day after that. And I never left the hotel. I just read it cover to cover, and that was it. So that was what really, stoked the fire, if you will.
Interesting. And how many years ago did you say that was?
This is almost my 17th year in the sport. So,
okay.
It was, this would be 16th actually. So, 2004.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I was, 2004, I was right in the middle of respiratory school at that point. Yeah. Yeah, that was about 3 years post when I graduated high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy to think back and timelines and just remember exactly how old you really are.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things that I think a lot of times, the longer time goes on, I'll look at a lot of people that and maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but I look at how long that they've been, practicing the sport. And, if they're Facebook friends or whatever, and I'll swear I remember them, on like the Apprentice Falconry Forum, Noah Schroeder's Falconry Forum that he had back in 2005, 2006, which was, kind of one of the predecessors of NAFX, which is now, all the Facebook, kind of forums and stuff. But you look at it and you go, I could swear, you've been doing this for longer. And people haven't, which is a beautiful part about the sport is people can get in and they can specialize, and you'll find that, I always tell people in the classes, pay no mind to the factor that we list the factor that somebody's a master or not, because a master just is a designation by the government. You've been doing it for 7 years.
Right.
Really, you can find, I was the apprentice director here in Ohio for 5 years, and I would find, apprentices that would come in that in some cases had much better skill sets than people that had been practicing for years.
Sure.
So,
you run into that a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it all just depends on how much time, you put into it. And, there's some people that are technically at master level that haven't hardly even put in near as much of the time as some apprentices.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, it's just reality.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it's cool. I mean, what did you fly whenever you first started, and what kind of has been your path as far as some people initially. I mean, there's guys that I know for that matter that haven't even ever flown a red tail.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
It's weird, yeah.
Because I think a lot of it is where you're at, and I would tell new apprentices, and then I've always, whenever we have, people that I've sponsored, I always talk about how the most important aspect of falconry is balance, and this idea of making sure that you fly a bird for what you have the prey for,
sure,
because it does best for your success as well as the bird's success. So here in Ohio, it's largely Harris hawks, red tails, or Goshawks. And so for me, started out with a red tail. I've always had a red tail in one of my mews. I started back in the old days where a general could have two birds. So, if you wanted to fly a cast of Harrises, which, I flew Harrises over Dachshunds for, 8 to 10 years. I wanted to have a cast of Harrises and a red tail for squirrels. But back then you had to kind of make your decisions. So, you'd fly a Harris with your friends and who had Harrises, and then you'd fly a red tail. Never really got into flying accipiters just because I had 2 young kids and, full-time job. And, with a red tail or Harris's, I could have them in the car. I kind of rearranged my schedule so that I was able to always have go into work early, work through lunch, and have meetings at one of the various locations around the city where I had fields. And so I could leave at 3:00 and, change in the restroom and be in the field right next to the facility, pretty quickly.
Sure.
So, so mainly red tails and Harris's. And then we've, with the school, we have quite a few Falcons that we lure fly. So, but I'm excited because here in Ohio, you've got a lot of, first and second year generals that are starting to take on accipiters. We've got, I think, 3 folks that have largely been flying red tails that are imprinting, Goshawks. And they're, normally you would get nervous about that unless they have a really good mentor. And, all 3 of them actually have been, connecting with and working with, one of our best goshawkers in the state, which is a guy named Gil Gross up in northeastern part of the state. He's actually my grand sponsor. So not that I'm saying I have to put that in there, but Gil's probably one of the best accipiter people that I know.
Cool.
So,
yeah, they're definitely not for beginners.
Yeah.
I mean, you really need some guidance with them because it's hard to make a good one and easy to mess one up.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I guess I've talked about this before in other episodes, but I was never really super bitten hard by the accipiter bug like some guys get, and I think it's just because I've just been so overexposed to them from the beginning because Mark and other buddies of mine have flown them pretty religiously since I've been exposed to the sport. So actually the first kill that I ever quote unquote got with the bird of prey was whenever I was just kind of shadowing in the field that first season that I was just tagging along, and Mark let me fly Dixie, and she wouldn't got one. It was like my second or third time out in the field ever. So like I said, it was one of those things where I just never I've just been exposed to them constantly. So some guys, I mean, I've run into guys that never even seen a goshawk fly before, and that's kind of like how we are in our area with bigger long wings, because not very many people fly them, and understandably so. And I mean, I've tried to fly a couple myself, and it's just different, So I mean, it's with the aggressive nature and with the skittish nature of accipiters, they're not an easy bird.
Yeah. And, Indiana obviously has, as you were saying, I mean, Ohio, we only really had 2 people that successfully flew, goshawks here. Nobody that I knew of that really, on a consistent basis, flew Cooper's hawks. I've known a couple of folks that have tried them, but it's not like they're racking up the game totals, huge numbers at least. One of my apprentices, Brian, actually flew one successfully for a couple of years, but and one of my apprentices now, Stephanie Stuckwish, is going to be, we're going to trap her one here this fall so she can, we have a farm here in Columbus, or down in Columbus, that has a lot of pigeons. So we're going to try to, be able to get some fun with that. But, Indiana has obviously, I think a lot more folks who are flying goshawks than here in Ohio.
Yeah. And fortunately, around the Kentucky area that kind of borders, and our area in southern Indiana, we have a pretty decent amount of cottontails, and that's really, not just cottontails, but more open fields and ditch lines and stuff that's more conducive to a goshawk hunt. And I mean, without that, you're kind of it's a lot tougher. It's a lot tougher.
Well, and most of the guys that are flying that are trying to imprint goshawks here, they're in the northeastern part of the state, so they're going to be open to flying those birds on squirrels, I'm sure. And that in and of itself has been a point of contention for a lot of the older goshawkers. It's almost like, how dare you fly them on squirrels? But there's a guy, a friend of mine, who used to, I remember when he first brought his first red tail to Columbus from Maine, a guy named Tom Gagney, great falconer. And he had the audaciousness to fly a imprint wild IS female goshawk on squirrels, and he did a great job of it. And, up to that point, I had been somewhat skeptical until I saw him fly his bird, and to watch that bird fly and to see how it hunted squirrels. I still won't necessarily, if I ever fly goshawk, probably pursue squirrels. That's probably why I won't fly goshawk, because we don't have anything but squirrels so much here in the central part of the state. But, he made me a believer that if it's done right, it can be done safely, as safe as can be.
Well, and I mean, let's just be honest. Anything a bird thinks it can catch and eat in the wild, it's going to go. I mean, it's a raptor isn't going to look at a squirrel and think, "Oh, that's a squirrel. I'm not going to go after it because it might bite my toes off or something."
You say yum.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they think they can, well, and granted, they're nowhere near as big a prey as obviously what we have here.
Yeah,
but I mean, like ground squirrels and stuff out west is what they naturally prey on anyway. So I mean,
and they're hunting. I mean, to be quite honest, in Maine and the northern reaches, the northern goshawk's eating a lot of squirrels too. So
sure. The only thing that I've heard in particular from guys that have started, and I think we had this conversation briefly before, but it's harder to get goshawks on squirrels, according to some guys, just because they don't have that natural tendency to want to, sometimes look up and want to follow through trees and stuff. It's just, they just don't have the same at times, especially if they're imprinted or whatnot, from what I've heard.
Well, and a lot of the belief is that, the natural way to fly goshawk is off the glove. And that's one thing that was interesting about Tom was he could fly his bird off the glove, but he could also fly it out of the tree. It would follow him. So, that was kind of interesting that he had that approach to it, But yeah, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I'm quite excited to see what Stephanie does with her Cooper's hawk, because she's one of those apprentices that is, she has a way with birds, and plus she's a driven hunter. And that's another thing that, I think a lot of people think that when we do these falconry school programs that we're just, talking about the beauty of the birds. One thing that we haven't been the apprentice director, we always talk about the importance of this is a hunting sport. Because, you'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't. And it's not a huge number, but we still get people that come through who, want to be falconers just so they can have a cool bird in the backyard.
Want to be pet keepers.
Yeah. And that's, I produced one of those unintentionally and swore that I would never do that again. And, the issue is you have to make sure that people that come into the sport realize that it is a hunting sport. Because we have to protect that. We have a heritage. And you and I were just talking before we got started here about the importance of understanding the history of the sport. Not just when we say history, the factor, of where it came from, but even more importantly, like our history here, the people who started the sport, our whole history of where we as a community have been and where we're going. And that's the key thing. Because I think right now we are at a very, very key point where this sport could take off exponentially in terms of, I don't think we're going to have huge numbers of falconers, but it's always been a 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 at most over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of people push against having more falconers, but I'm of the belief that for the sport to remain healthy with all of the threats that we have, out there, I think we have to be very careful about how we present the sport, and I think we do a pretty good job, but we have to make sure that we're bringing in more people to the sport, people who are, ethical, people that are hunters, that, will respect the beauty and the grace and the history of this sport, and will become good, sponsors for future generations, because I think that's key.
Yeah, and I think that there's the importance of that, like you said, can't be lost or forgotten, because I mean the whole premise behind this is to actively fly your bird on game.
Yep.
And if you're not doing that, it's not falconry, and period.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate, because I think to a certain degree there are aspects of what's happened over the last X amount of years that's, it doesn't seem quite as important to some as it should be. It is what it is. I mean, I completely agree, though, that that's a big reason why I think things like podcasts and other aspects of media are important. Because we can either choose how that's going to be chosen to portray us, or we can, take it kind of firm, grasp it firmly with our own hands and kind of, take it forward ourselves and try and get an initiative on how we want to be portrayed and, want to, affect how people see it and in a positive way versus a negative way. And I totally agree. All that being said, what made you start the school? I mean, knowing, without going, trying to kind of dance around words a little bit.
Semantics.
Semantics a little bit. And, trying to maintain a certain degree, I guess, of, as much as I hate it, political correctness, as far as, there's a lot of drama that goes along with putting yourself in any degree of forefront, and whether it's doing something like a school or anytime you put yourself in the public eye can potentially be a downer for other people. And it can be a target too. Sure.
We started the school largely because a number of different reasons. First of all, I mean, it is amazing to be able to do what you love and make a living at it. I mean, I'm not, we're not.
What's that like?
What's that?
I said, what's that like?
What's that like? Well, yeah, there you go. But it's. I mean, now, mind you, once again, you're not making huge. It's not like we're making millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, sure.
But you have a passion for it, and it's the same thing with abatement. I mean, people, that got into abatement, to be able to fly your birds every single day, and and have people appreciate that and pay you for it.
Sure.
So when we first started the school, the thought process, and I alluded a little bit earlier to it, the thought process was, for years, I was the guy in Ohio as the apprentice director that would go out and do education, whether it was for Boy Scout troops or for whatever. And I drive all over the state to do it. And I never took any money for it. I think there's some clarity now around, you can ask for mileage or reimbursement or things like that.
I was getting ready to throw in that because legally you can anyway.
Yeah.
But.
So the challenge was there were pieces and parts of that I wanted people to understand the nature of working with these birds, and also understanding the unique relationship where there's an excitement, there's a passion that occurs that when a bird flies to somebody's glove. And, to be quite honest, I started looking around, and, there's so many people that say you can't do things. And I used to be in that little clicker mindset, if you will, of, always looking around going, oh, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. And I'm like, you know what? These people at these resorts can do it. Why is it that just the people at the resorts can do it? So we started looking at what it was that allowed them to do it. We were only the 6th school of falconry. I don't know if it was the 6th permit. There might have been others that got permits but didn't take it.
Yeah. See, when I first started talking to you, I wasn't even aware that there were even that many.
Oh, there's about 20 or more now.
That's crazy.
I've helped.
I hadn't. And I guess that's just me not paying attention or being naive about how many. I was shocked that there was even 6.
Well, I owe a lot of it to the people that went before us. So the first School of Falconry was started, I think it was the early 90s at a place called the Equinox Resort. And it was the British School of Falconry. John and Emma Ford started it. And then from my understanding, Chris Davis, who later started New England Falconry, and they're also at the Woodstock, and Dwayne Zobrist, who started the Greenbrier, which is kind of like the flagship of falconry programs in the country now, and was for many years. They both worked with the Fords, and then they started their own schools at other resorts. And Dwayne actually has 3 different schools. He has one at the Greenbrier, one at Homestead, and Deanna Curtis, who's a great falconer. And actually, she was one of the first falconers whose red tails I ever saw catch a jackrabbit back in 2012. It was really cool. And so Deanna actually works with Roger Tucker at the Broadmoor out in Colorado. And so there were a couple of other schools. Nancy Cowan ran a freestanding school up in New Hampshire. And then really Kate Martin. Nancy Cowan worked with us a little bit, helped us understand what we needed to do. But Kate Martin out at West Coast Falconry, which is located in Marysville outside of Sacramento, she actually was amazing to us. I mean, Kate is somebody who I really admire because she, the school that she started, did everything to the most part that we wanted to do. And she did it with a grace in terms of how I would see the YouTube videos of her working with people. She builds relationship with people, and she demonstrates with every time that she works with her birds that, it's about relationship and trust. And so, Kate was amazing in helping us get started. And so I think the difference with us was we were the first school that really kind of blatantly marketed, via Facebook largely, what we did. And, there were groups that the resorts didn't have to market because all the marketing was in-house. They have a captive audience that comes through that are looking for things to do. Most of those resorts are, pretty posh resorts. So, they make a good living off of the work or the people that come through. Being a freestanding school, similar to Nancy and to Nancy Cowan and Kate Martin, you have to, really be innovative in how you approach things. And so, Nancy talked to us a little bit about how she marketed in, travel magazines and some other different stuff. And Kate talked to us about some of the different programming that she designed. So we looked at a lot of different things, and we initially started with this simulation. So, we thought about what is it that allows people to get hands-on with birds, but understand a little bit more about all this information. So the permit that we get from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they give us a long bulleted list of everything we have to cover. And so, sometimes you go to some of the schools and they'll sit there for an hour with a bird on the glove, just going blah, 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 basically running through almost like they're running through a script. Mm-hmm. And people gloss over and, start getting distanced real quick. And so our thought was you have to engage people quickly. And you have to make sure that that information is put in some context of either a tactile or an experiential piece where they can see, touch, hear, whatever, and understand whether it's a piece of equipment or whether it's, how you're getting that bird to, make its first hop or things like that. So the simulation that we use is one that, we've helped about 10 other people start falconry schools since we got started. And so, when we sit down with them, we talk to them about here's how we approach things. My wife says I'm not a very good business person because I basically tell everybody, what I've learned and how I've been successful. But right. Kate and Nancy helped us. Chris Davis actually has helped us in the last year understand a lot more about the resort side of business. So people have helped us. So I always try to, help other people. But the idea is, we created this simulation where when people come in, we pretend that they are a brand new falconer, brand new apprentice. And so we say, you've just trapped your first bird. Now you're going to learn the skills that you need to work with that bird. And so, it's when we first started, we used 3 or 4 different birds. We had one red tail, a captive bred red tail that we kept super fat. And his whole job was to actually just hop to people. And sometimes he was so fat he didn't want to do it. But even in the bird not hopping, you learn something about that. So, you learn how to read the behavior, do this and that. And so, they will fly the bird farther and farther distances on the Krantz line. And then we'll say, guess what? Now you're ready for your first free flight. And so we go and we'll use a couple of Harris Hawks, put them up in a tree, and we take like a 30, 40-minute walk where the birds are shooting through the tree. And we have people practice the skills that they learn. And this is, sometimes we'll see some of the YouTube videos of other schools and how they have, that you and I talked about that, about how they'll have, hold the hand up for the bird to fly. And we're very specific about making sure that people do it exactly how we taught them, because as we know as falconers, there's a the devil's in the details. And so there's even a nuanced difference of how you hold the bird on the glove, right. Whether your hands down, low or high, impacts whether that bird feels safe or not. So
sure. And you're also, want to not have any unnecessary insurance claims against your
we've been
business.
lucky. We've never had any issues. We are very, very, very how do we say it? Stringent about handling practices.
Yeah, I'm
so
sure.
we always, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife says you have to be no more than 3 to 5 feet away from the person, which in, a 6 foot social distancing is a little bit more of a challenge. But we always have our people there, and the people that teach our classes, we've had largely for the first 2, 3, 4 years, I was the one teaching the classes. But now we have, we started with Amy Mahalik, who taught our classes. She was one of my former apprentices and one of our first, I call them flight instructors. And so most of our classes now are taught by Stephanie Stuckwish, who I mentioned earlier, who's one of my apprentices, probably one of my best apprentices. Don't tell her that, because I don't want her to get a big head. But and then Katie Wickberg, who is a falconer from Colorado Springs, who actually is going to school not too far from here at Ashland University. And Katie's a great person, very much a go-getter. She actually started the sport at the age of 9 when she was volunteering at the U.S. Air Force Academy there in Colorado Springs. And so Sam Dollar actually took her on as an apprentice when she was 12. And talk about your first bird. Her first red tail that she flew was a 62-ounce bird, big female red tail, which, I mean, how many of us go, oh, my God. But she actually started, we met her a couple years ago, and she started only the second falconry club at a university. And so she started teaching classes for us when Stephanie went over to Scotland last year to get her master's, and does a great job. And we support her in all the work that she does with her falconry club at Ashland. She has 60 members in that club. I mean, at a small university, 60 people that actually come out and, learn about the sport of falconry from a fantastic advocate for the sport in Katie. So we like to actually have people that teach the classes. I always say, an old, fat, bald guy, teaching the classes. Having young people teach the class sends another message that this is a sport that is not just for old guys. It's for everybody. And that's the key thing for the sport to grow. We have to bring people in from across the gamut.
Well, sure. And you also want to bring the right people in.
Absolutely.
Because like you said, if someone can be influential enough to have a club of 60 other kids or 60 other young adults or whatever the case may be at a college, university, or wherever, you don't want the wrong message being sent to all 60 of those people, because that grows exponentially.
Yeah, and that's the challenge is, sometimes we have to be careful when we partner with organizations. One, we will not partner with an organization that will in any way portray a negative image of the sport of falconry, or will not, have a negative viewpoint. When I say sometimes, organization is more than happy to partner with you, but, what are they saying on the backside of things? So we've been lucky in that the 7 rehab organizations that we partner with here in Ohio, last year our goal was to give back $4,000 of food, fundraising or direct donations, and we ended up hitting 10,000 last year. Mind you, this year is going to be a lot less because of COVID.
Sure.
But the idea is that each of those organizations that we partner with, is incredibly dedicated to this idea of conservation. So we say our tagline or our mission statement is conservation, preservation, and education. Conservation of the birds of prey that we love and the wild place they live, preservation of the sport of falconry, and both of those through education. Education creates awareness and it provides resources. So since we don't do conservation work, we direct that back into supporting these rehab organizations. And it's been a wonderful partnership. We bring them in to do programming with us, and then we share contacts. And, the idea is everybody. The challenge is things should, the human mindset is all about adversarial. I can't win if the other person doesn't lose. And that has to change, And so some of our own worst enemies within the sport of falconry are each other, And so how do we, granted.
yeah.
And so how is it that we work together instead of me looking over somebody else's shoulder and going, I'm waiting to see him doing something wrong, is to say, how can I support that person? Or even just say, attaboy, or that's amazing. Even if it's something that I might be jealous because I'm not in a place where I can fly that type of bird. But, when one of us does something unique or different or whatnot. Like flying a red-shouldered hawk and catching game with it. Who knew? You knew I had to throw that in there. But I mean, the idea is by supporting each other, we actually do a much better service to helping this sport grow. I'm never going to live out west and be able to fly a long wing, probably. My wife and my family are tied here in Ohio. So what is it that I can do in terms of I can take trips out? I'm never going to be flying a long wing on, or much less a cast of long wings on game birds or whatever.
Big grouse or whatever.
Absolutely,
the case may be.
yeah. But, when I go out and I get a chance to see, Roger Tucker flying a goshawk back in 2012 and seeing that goshawk chase down jackrabbits and seeing him fly a prairie falcon. Those are the types of things that, that's what the NAFA meet is about, that and the social aspect for a lot of people. But being able to see and celebrate what it is that brings us together and ties us together as a community. That's the key of we found a family. When people find themselves in falconry, for many of us, it fits. It's like we found a family. But remember, sometimes the most dysfunctional groups of people are your own family.
Well, sure.
Anyway, so that's that's a little bit about where I think we're going.
Hey everyone, just wanted to pop back in again here during a quick intermission, and thank you all again so much for continuing to download and listen to the podcast even during the downtime and this hiatus that's kind of unfortunately been, it is what it is, but we really appreciate it, and our goal is to be able to at least bring you all one new episode a month over the next couple months here in the short term, at least until we can see how the fall and winter declares itself. So our goal is to be able to do more again eventually, but we'll just have to see how it goes. So just wanted to say thank you all again regardless, and we'll jump right back into it. Thanks.
We've helped a lot of people get school started, but the idea is we try to push this idea of ethical practice in teaching actual skills. We don't always see those organizations that sprout up doing that same thing. We try to teach this idea of giving back because, technically we have to be a kind of a for-profit to run this, because U.S. Fish and Wildlife won't give the permit to an organization, if you will. They give it to individuals, just like rehab permits go to an individual and not to the rehab center. So we always have that nonprofit mindset in saying this is how we want to operate. We want to make sure that we're giving back. That's why we have the relationships with the places that we do. The two camps. We have a YMCA camp. We have a shelter house camp that we work out of, and a conservation society organization, because it gives back. That's why when we teach from a place of getting people to understand the sport, but making sure that while we're teaching proper ethics about the sport, we're also making sure that we're not giving people the wrong idea. Mm-hmm. So when people say, "Can I pet your bird?" No.
Yeah.
And here's why. Let people understand that, this bird actually, if you run your hand down his back, you're going to be stripping his waterproofing off. And, so help people understand the nuances of why we do what we do and how we do it. And so hopefully we've been able to influence those that we've helped get started to have that same level of ethical practice and and that approach.
It's cool. I mean, we've done scout talks and talks at like park gatherings, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it is cool to see the look on people's faces whenever they're seeing the concept of working with a wild animal like that for the first time. It really is. It's cool. It's rewarding. I mean, I can totally understand why you enjoy doing it so much. But just real quick, what's been, well, I guess this is a two-part question. What's been your favorite experience so far with your personal falconry?
Oh, sure.
And what's been your favorite experience so far with the teaching?
I think probably, from a personal standpoint, I can go into, my first kill of this or my first kill of that or whatever.
There's always at least a couple memories that stick out in every falconer's mind as to what.
For me, it was, I think the excitement that I see every time I have an apprentice that catches their first rabbit or their first squirrel. because we put so much work into our apprentices. The year before, we have them do everything they legally can in terms of learning how to work with the bird, make equipment, trap, all the different pieces, parts. So there's a lot of regulations around the ubiquitous, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes right now,
right.
pre-apprentice. But we want them to be, when I got my first bird, I had a fantastic sponsor, but he was 3 hours away. So when I got my first bird, it was horrendous. I mean, I didn't know how to handle the bird. I was overfeeding it. I was everything. We caught 2 rabbits that year, and I created a monster bird that had to be turned loose. So, I always said I would never allow my future apprentices to actually have to suffer that way. So that's why we try to get them to handle the bird as much as we can in terms of, the different pieces, parts that they're legally able to do as a quote unquote, air quotes, pre-apprentice. And so when they actually do get their first bird, they literally are much more comfortable working with it. They're much more comfortable, doing all the different things so everything that they learn should be preparing them for, I think, the most important part of the sport of falconry, which is the ethical dispatchment, the humane dispatchment of, the prey species, because that's the humanity we bring into nature, really.
Right.
And so every time I see them with all the work that they've done, when their bird catches a rabbit, and to see them be able to slide in there and, in a very, very skilled way. I mean, mind you, skilled, they're an apprentice. So, you still have to give them tips every now and then, but, to see them be able to catch their first head of game and to be able to say, welcome, brother or sister, to this amazing community. And so from a personal standpoint, I always love that part of it. With the school, I think we had been approached by the community that I live in Central Ohio. And so I've been approached by somebody who was doing the sustainability fair. And, they're like, you have to be there because you're the only, animals that we have at this sustainability fair, and you're going to be a draw and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't want to do it. I mean, I got a bird in from Ryan Anthony, actually. We got one of his Harris-Hawks that he flew, a bird named Eddie, who's part of our programs. And Eddie came in. I thought this was a great way for me to go and to actually work with him in front of a group, see how he's, is he a nervous bird, whatnot. So I took Eddie over there. I'm just standing there, and this little girl comes running up. And, when we do this, we always get the same questions, Is that a golden eagle?
How's it come back? How do you get it to come back to you?
Yeah. Does it talk? I mean, so, you're just used to answering these questions over and over again. And so this she's 12 at the time, 12-year-old girl came running up, and she's like, oh my God, that's a Harris's hawk. I'm like, how the heck do you know that? And she's like, that's the only social bird of prey. They actually hunt in family units. I'm like, oh my God, and it's one of those things where you go, this could be 12-year-old me, back then. So, I must make sure that I nurture and help you become a falconer. So as she's talking to me, she runs off, and, we get surrounded by other kids, and she comes back like 5 minutes later, and you could tell she's a little, nervous because she wants to ask her question. And so the kids are asking the same question. Is that a bald eagle? Is that? Yeah. And she finally goes, it's a Harris's hawk. It's the only social bird of prey. The young stay with their parents for 3 to 4 years. She goes, can I ask my question now? and it was so funny because she said, I have this burning question. Which is more difficult to train? An IS captive bred peregrine falcon or a passage prairie falcon? And I'm like, you're using words. How did you learn these things? And so I found out later that we had done a program for police and fire for the city of Bexley, where they had us come in, and we had, the bird able to fly to people. And this had been a year or two before, and, she had one of our Harris-Hawks fly to her. And that was that seed that was planted in her mind. And so she basically, wanted to become a falconer. And for 2 years, she was just reading everything that she could. And so, wow. We actually, and that's what kind of changed my approach towards this. The idea is even if I'm not remembered by that kid, the factor that I was that one falconer that at one time helped plant a seed, that maybe she becomes a falconer, maybe not. Maybe she just becomes, a naturalist. That's able to impact, kids.
Regardless, the important angle is that you weren't the guy that made her negatively
absolutely
remember.
Absolutely.
And
we never want to portray the sport or the birds or our interactions with them in a negative way. But I also choose to say from an appreciative, there's a thing called appreciative inquiry where, you always look at what is the best that we can do and to strive for that rather than trying to avoid, the stumps in the middle of the, path. I always try to say, and to the people that I, have work with us and teach, always look for how can you help people see the highest nature of this sport, and that comes down to how do we treat the birds? How do we treat the prey animals when they're caught? And never, ever, ever apologize for the fact that this is a hunting sport, because there will be people that come through that try to get you to, in some ways, either make an excuse for the sport or, try to get you to, in some manner, shape or form, almost like you're apologizing for the sport. And we have nothing to apologize for. This is our right to practice the sport. We need to make sure that we always keep it at the highest levels of practice possible. And that comes down to bringing people in that are going to be, not just advocates for the sport, but also people who are going to be, practicing at a very high level.
Sure. No, I totally agree. And so on that note, and kind of like we briefly touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do you think things are going to either grow or potentially digress from here? Because I know for me, even just seeing how hard it is to continue to do the podcast with people just under these circumstances, and with everybody's personal lives being shaken up as much as they have been, mine included, me having to all of a sudden travel around for work and spend time away from family and not knowing how this is going to affect even my personal falconry practice. I mean, what do you think? How do you? I mean, are we even going to have the NAFA meet this year? I mean, there's so many things from that angle that I think is just interesting. I know plans are, for last I heard, was yes, and I think there's going to be as many people as possible trying not to let all of this going on disrupt how they're going to do things, but there's only so much you can control. Yeah. So I mean, how do you think things are going to go from there?
The good news is you already have social distancing in the weathering yard, so that's a key piece. I don't know about the NAF meet. I've been to one. I wish I had been able to go to more, but the fall is one of the key times when we're teaching classes.
And not even just the NAFA meet, but all overall, these state clubs and all these different meets that happen through, especially the winter months when the hunting is at its peak.
So I think Indiana's blessed that you guys have a number of different meets each year. Here in Ohio, we have one meet at the end of the season. But we do have a picnic coming up. So it's one of those things. I think we'll continue to. I know, like in Ohio. I'm sure that the leadership of the state club, which, we have a really good club here in Ohio, that they're already kind of talking about, making sure that when they come together for the picnic that people are social distancing and, wearing masks and things like that. But, I think it's going to be weird because you're already starting to see, me and the group that I kind of hang out with, we've already started talking about, we started talking about this a while ago. You're going to start seeing the first hit was on breeders. Because the breeders had already started their plans for this season. And, you can't necessarily, you could destroy eggs, but, by the time we got to where, March and April, you already have those birds either sitting eggs or you got them in the incubators. So you're starting to see a lot of those folks actually, having to sell off a lot of birds. And you're finding falconers that, because of a loss of a job or this or that. I mean, you have a lot of people that got that, stimulus check that went out and bought birds or equipment. I bet Marshall's doing great on their GPSs right now because that $1,200 was right about the cost of a GPS setup. But, it's one of those things where you're starting to see those birds being, sold. And kind of put on Raptor's Nest or Raptors for sale, and the prices are coming down because they're still sitting there. So I think part of the challenge is going to be they're going to practice closer to home. There's probably not going to be as many trips. And people are looking at the birds that they want to fly for close by. So, I think you're probably going to have a lot less people going to these state meets this year. My hope is that we're going to have some semblance of a vaccine by the end of the year. I see the look on your face.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's actually and the funny thing is they're already saying, but we're not going to let people who are overweight, take it first, because there must be some, complications. I'm like, I'm a man of substance,
Moving on with topics.
You don't like that one, eh?
You're already starting to see the vein pop out in my forehead, dude.
Yeah. Well, I worked in healthcare as well, so I can understand where you're coming from. But the idea is that, for the next year or so, people keep talking about a new normal, and we'll have to see what it is. I mean, I think that, falconry itself will survive. It's the growth of falconry, with a lot of people want to become apprentices. I think you're going to find a renewed interest in it.
It's been around for thousands of years through all kinds of things that have been worse than way worse than what we've experienced with this,
and in Ohio, now. I mean, we went from, the stats just came out, we went from 55 falconers in the state in 2005 to we got 110 or 111. And there's probably a couple more, people that I know I have one who hasn't taken the test yet, an apprentice. So it'll continue to grow, but, it'll be interesting to see. We had the chance to go down to the Kentucky meet. Were you down at the Kentucky meet this year?
This last one?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, they did, Clint and Tyler down there, and all the folks that put it on did a really nice job for putting on a kind of a regional meet. I thought, is that a regional meet?
No, I'm just frowning at the
noise upstairs.
The
gotcha.
Upstairs, yeah.
Couldn't tell.
Yeah.
But they put on a really nice meet. And so I think we're probably going to see more regional type stuff like that. That's in the next couple of years where people are staying closer to home.
I should correct myself. I was at last summer's.
Last summer's?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't like with everything going on with traveling and stuff. Anything going on, like I know I'm going to get to go back to our Indiana one August 15th.
I think there's anybody here in the Midwest who does a program or does a picnic quite like you guys.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. I mean, that'll hopefully, some of the guys will listen to that, and thanks for the props for that.
Well, not that I'm saying the Ohio picnic is not done well. Jeff Millsop, we appreciate you having it at your house, and it's very, very nice. But Indiana has so many more falconers than we do, and and it draws from all the surrounding states. So, I was there once in, I think it was 2000, might have been 16 or 15, and Lauren was speaking. And it was just, incredibly well run. I think it's at the same place at the
Brown County.
Brown County.
Yep.
And it's just neat. It's a nice setup. You got to meet a lot of people that I had heard of.
Yeah.
And just a lot of cool birds. So
cool.
There was actually a Fruge there. I don't know who in the Midwest was flying a Fruge.
It was probably Emmons. Yeah,
was
Greg Emmons.
That was a gorgeous bird.
Yeah, he tried flying one at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was probably his that he had at the time.
Yeah. Beautiful bird. And the weathering area was gorgeous. I mean, there had tons of different birds that you could see. It's great. I love those types of events for people who are wanting to get into the sport, because when they go, it is, they can see kind of the camaraderie amongst falconers. And, most every picnic that I've ever been to, I've been picnics in 4 states now. The community has always been welcoming. So newbies are kind of, unless they say or do something stupid, they're welcomed in. And plus people can see all the different birds. Their imaginations can take flight, pun intended. Their imaginations can take flight. And they're able to see, gosh, I want to fly that bird. I want to fly that bird.
Yeah.
Because, people always start out wanting to fly some certain bird. And then, once they get into it, they find either a new respect for red tails, or they find, gosh, that guy has, goshawks. I want to fly goshawks, or et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. Well, I mean, and barring all the stuff that's going on right now with the pandemic and everything, assuming that didn't happen, and assuming, at some point there is some degree of normalcy return, barring all that, I mean, what else would you like to see progress with our community?
So that's the interesting thing. Everybody says that we want to have a strong, healthy falconry community, but when you talk to people one-on-one, I mean, we all have the same concerns.
Right.
If I'm, for 12 years, I was the only falconer in Central Ohio. So I had my run of all of the fields. I knew where everything was, and I could, I didn't worry about somebody else coming into a field, et cetera, et cetera. It was beautiful. I loved it. But, there came a point where I was like, going out and hunting by myself all the time, I'd love to have other people here. So we started sponsoring people locally.
It's no fun otherwise.
Yeah, I know. I know it is. But, I started taking on apprentices in Central Ohio, and oftentimes people were like, well, I found this field. And I was like, oh, yeah, I call it this field. And they would get a little put off by it. And I'm like, listen, I've been doing this for many years, and you can't crawl into a field that I haven't been in, anywhere within 20 miles of downtown.
Yeah.
And so what I did was my mindset changed. The idea, instead of saying, that's my field, don't go into it, it was to say, let's kind of talk about where the fields are so we can manage them. Mm-hmm. And so we got 3 or 4 Falconers in Columbus now, besides myself. And, we all hunt together. I call it breaking bread, or my sponsor used to calling it eating beast flesh. We either get hamburgers or hot dogs or, steak or whatever. And we get together and break bread and we fly in the same fields. We keep each other up to speed on, if you're taking this or taking there, the numbers, so we don't overtax the fields or the different places. And the community that we created is one that was talking about earlier of hopefully the larger falconry community, where we support each other rather than become adversarial.
Right.
That's the key thing. That's the beauty of our community, is we're at our best when we're supporting each other and when we're unified. When we have, that's why the people talk about the molt, the behaviors during the molt. And there's probably some science to that, the fact you can't fly your bird. And for many of us, that's our church, if you will, or our therapy. But I'd love to see the falconry community itself grow, because reasonably, I don't want us to become the UK where you can buy a Harris Hawk, off the internet without any backing.
Or a golden eagle.
Now that's okay. I'm all right with buying a golden eagle off the internet. In fact, if you know where there is one that I can buy off the internet, and it's legal, I'll buy it.
Right. But not just being anybody.
No. Once again, this is a hunting sport.
Right.
That's keep coming back to that. Right. This is a hunting sport. Right. This is not a fly the bird around. And people that get into the sport, that's one of the things is my first apprentice, her name was Maureen, and she had a falconer that lived down the street from her, half mile. And that falconer didn't take her on. And I was, when she came out with us, I took her out in the field, and basically, I had her do things. She and her husband came to the field. I had her do things in terms of beating brush and, handling, after we dispatched the rabbit, doing, cutting it up and doing this and that showed to me that she had no problem with those different parts of the sport.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's a key thing, is oftentimes, people go, they're not a hunter or whatnot. Yeah. So I talked to this other falconer after I agreed to take Maureen on, and I said, why didn't you, take this person on? And he said, well, she's a girl. She's not going to hunt. And I said, that's kind of funny you would say that.
Ouch.
Because, mind you, this was back in 2000, late 2000s, when there were not as many women as we have in the sport today, which is, once again, we need to have a broader gamut of people in this sport, coming from every single background. But yeah, ouch. Yeah. And the thing is he never took the opportunity to get to know Maureen, because what he would have realized was she actually used to work for a bird abatement company that worked at the Toronto airport, because she's from Canada. So she had flown great horned owls and worked with eagles and worked with all these different birds. So she had this background, but he never took the time to get to know her.
Can't always judge a book by its cover.
You can't.
But...
And she became one of my best apprentices. Stephanie reminds me a lot of her and the drive that they have as hunters. So you don't have to be a hunter to start, but you have to be open to doing the things that helps that bird be successful.
I wasn't a hunter to start.
Neither was I.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, I think, believe it or not, we're actually a little over an hour already.
Great.
So, and I'll real quick too, for anyone that wants to come, as I mentioned before, I know our Indiana meet, our summer picnic that we have every year it's in Brown County, park and, close to Bloomington. It's August 15th. more the merrier. Come hang out. And you said they could find the dates for your picnic on.
So make sure you type in Ohio Falconry Association. Ohio Falconry is our site on Facebook, but they're Ohio Falconry Association.
Right. And as far as your website, and you want to go ahead and plug yours as well?
So our website is ohioschooloffalconry.com. And I always put that plug out there whenever we teach a class. Make sure you support your local rehabbers, raptor rehabbers, because they're doing the hard work. We're just here to teach about the sport. They're the ones that actually are taking care of our wild populations of raptors.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming up, and we'll go hang out.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thanks
awesome,
so much.
Man. Thanks.
Bye-bye.